It's coming. Promise. Oh, hey, we got thumbs up. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us at American Canyon High School to have this community meeting. I am Marianne Valles, and I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Instructional Services with the Napa Valley Unified School District. And before we get started, I'd like to introduce a few of the folks who are with us tonight. Dr. Rosana Musetti, Superintendent of Schools, and Trustees Jankowitz and Shunk are in the room as well. And I see a lot of faces that I think we need to acknowledge who's in the room. So if you're a teacher in American Canyon, either at the high school or one of the other schools, can you wave your hand? All right, welcome. Thank you for being here. If you are a parent at American Canyon High School or one of the other schools, raise your hand. Oh, filled the house. Thank you. Thank you for being here. And I know that there are other administrative staffs from the other schools in American Canyon. Will you raise your hand? All right, thank you, and welcome for being here. And Crystal Lopez, Principal Lopez, American Canyon High School, thank you for hosting us once again. And we'll acknowledge some of the work that she and her team have done to get us to this juncture in the conversation. Also with me is Wade Roach, Assistant Superintendent of Business, and Assistant Superintendent of HR, Alejandro Hogan. And we will be your hosts tonight. So I want to set the tone for what today is going to be about. Many of you, I think, participated in the Town Hall Listen and Learn session that was held in the library a few weeks ago. And then those of you who are staff here at American Canyon High School, you participated in a staff meeting discussion about this topic a few weeks ago as well. So this is the next step in this process. And what we hope to do today is just clarify what the picture is moving forward, the fiscal picture moving forward for the district as a whole. Listen to the concerns, the interests, and the questions of this audience, and try to respond with every piece of information we have. We're going to begin with the fiscal picture, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about impact on instructional program and offerings. And we'll conclude. We only have about 15 minutes of presentation, about 12 slides, so most of the time will be dedicated to conversation with the audience. Sound okay? All right, so I wanted to also talk a little bit about timeline, because usually district staff engage communities around the budget forecast and things to look forward to beginning in January after the governor has released their budget for the year. And so we do budget planning starting in January all the way through the spring in preparation for the upcoming school year. We're here a little early this year because we have some big things to discuss and understand together. We have a projected decline in enrollment and projected increases in costs, and that's affecting the overall offerings that we can give and provide in our schools. And so we want to understand that really well together and then engage in dialogue. So I will pass it on to Wade Roach, who will walk us through all of the fiscal picture. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. As you guys know, our district is an LCFF district, Local Control Funding Formula district, which means that a majority of the money that we get to run our school district comes from enrollment and attendance. So 90% of the school districts in California are just like us and operate through LCFF. But the rest of the districts here in Napa County is a very rich district, or rich county, so they operate on property taxes, and we're a little different than those other districts. So the district to our north, and we didn't name them in this slide, but you know who they are, they operate on property taxes solely, and last year they received about $26,000 per student to operate their general fund budget. You can see for our district, we received about $9,300 per student under LCFF. But LCFF also gives a little bit more money to poorer districts, districts that have need, have EL students, have socioeconomic needs, have a lot of foster students. So the district directly to our south received about $9,900 per year last year to operate their general fund. So you can see that we're not rich enough to be one of the richer districts, and our economics are such that we're not so poor that we don't get that extra money from the state. So we're kind of in the middle, which impacts how we operate our general fund and what we can offer to our students. Oh, next, back. That's fine. So up until around 13, 14, 14, 15, Napa Valley Unified was a growing school district. We were growing anywhere between 100 and 300 students per year for the decade before 13, 14, 14, 15. And then in 14, 15, we kind of plateaued and we started dropping. And you can see in this slide, it's a little bit hard to read. This is 14, 15 projected out for 10 years through 24, 25. You see the district numbers of enrollment, and then you see the charters. So we have 2 charter schools. Dependent charter schools, we have Napa Valley Language Academy, and we have River School. And you can see that their projections are fairly flat, but the district as a whole, you see that decline. And if it was a little bit easier to read, you could see a decline of almost 2,000 students over the next decade, which has a dramatic impact on our general fund operating budget. So where we're seeing that decline right now is not so much at the high school level, it's at the elementary school level. So when we look at our kindergartners and first grades and second grades, we're seeing a decline as younger families move out of the area and can't afford to live here in Napa County. But our high schools have been remained fairly stable. So in this slide, you see American Canyon High School on the right-hand side, and you see all the district high schools on the left-hand side. And you can see 10-11 was our opening year in American Canyon High School. We grew through 17-18. But you can see also when you look at all 9 through 12 students, the district really hasn't seen a huge drop at all in high school. We project that's going to change in about 3 or 4 years. But overall high school population for the district in its entirety has been fairly stable for the last few years. And of course, American Canyon High School has been fairly stable for the last 3 years or so. And the number on the right, just to give you a little more information, those are inter-district students. Those are students that come to the district from other districts, for say St. Helena or Fairfield or Vallejo. And you can see that number also has been fairly consistent over the last 3 or 4 years, not varying too much at either American Canyon High School or at the district in total. The other issue, other than the loss of enrollment and ADA that we're dealing with, is an increase in our fixed costs. So when you're an employee of the school district, you can either be a STRS employee, which is State Teacher Retirement System, or a PERS employee, a Public Employee Retirement System. And those 2 items make up a huge portion of our budget. And the state of California, realizing that those 2 programs are underfunded, has started to increase the funding that employers are required to contribute to PERS and STRS. So remember, for our teachers, STRS is their only retirement. Teachers don't get Social Security. So this is their bread and butter, if you will, for their retirement years. So we as the employer have to increase our contribution to keep that funding secure into the future. So you can see the rates increase over the next 3 years, and then they have been increasing over the last couple of years. And those are actually increases in expenses. That's not the total amount we contribute for our employees. That's the increase in each of those out years. So we're losing revenue because our enrollment is declining, but we have these increased expenses because of STRS and PERS. So as you look ahead in what we call a multi-year projection, you can see that our revenues are increasing because we are going to get a little bit of a COLA, cost of living adjustment from the state, but our expenses are also increasing. So we're looking at deficits in our general fund of about a little over $6.5 million in 1920, in 2021 about 3.7, 21-22 a little under $1 million. So as we look and we have to prepare our multi-year projections, which we have to do when we prepare the budget in January, we have this issue that we're dealing with because of loss of enrollment and increased in fixed costs. So the cost of a 7-period day at American Canyon High School. So if you look on the left, you can see what a traditional high school, 5 of 6, and you guys understand what that is. You have 6 periods that the students take, and the teachers teach 5 of those, and there's 1 prep period. For 1,570 students, assuming that the teachers have 168 contacts, they meet with 168 students per year. That's the number of full-time equivalent FTE, as we call teachers, that we would need to run a 506 program, about 56.2 FTE. When you have a 5 of 7 program, you need more teachers on staff in order to have that extra class for our students. So the number of FTEs that you need to run a 507 is about 65.6 FTE. Assuming an average cost, that's about $865,000 annually to run that 5 of 7 program. So one of the things to look at as we move forward is how many additional students would you need to try to cover that cost, and to cover $865,000 in that delta between 506 and 507, you would have to have 97 additional students. But if you had 97 additional students, you would need another 4 teachers, so that would increase the cost of $368,000. So it becomes a hard issue to deal with, because the more students you add, the more teachers you add to get to that point of equilibrium. And that's all we have on finance right now. I'm going to turn it back over to Marianne.
Thank you. So we wanted to at least make sure we were all on the same playing field in terms of information, the fiscal information and the impact on course planning and the opportunities of students to meet both high school graduation requirements and college admission requirements in a 6-period day. So this chart is simply to show the courses that are required for high school graduation and college admission, and how they fit in a 6-period day, and the impact of that. So you may be sitting here thinking, well, my student is taking this elective and that elective and another elective, and maybe they won't fit given the chart as it stands right here. So keep that in mind as we continue talking. I'll walk us through this chart just to make sure we all see it in the same way. So the English requirement is a 4-year requirement. Every year of high school, a student must take an English class. The name of that class might be slightly different from year to year or from school to school, but it's an English class. The second requirement is a math requirement. There is a 3-year math requirement in Napa Valley Unified School District to graduate. Now, I want to point out that for many of you, you have high expectations of your children's college admission, and 3 years of math is probably not good enough for many of the 4-year colleges that your students might be interested in. So you might be pressing for a 4th year of math with your student. Similarly, in science, there is a 2-year graduation requirement, 1 biological, 1 physical, but 3 years is required for admission to the University of California or California State University. And just so we're all clear, UC are the kinds of schools like Berkeley, like Santa Cruz, and San Diego. CSUs are the closest ones, Sonoma, Sacramento, San Francisco, those schools. And they run from San Diego all the way to the northernmost Humboldt, and from the Central Valley to the coast. The next requirement is physical education, PE. There is a 2-year requirement, and most schools have all 9th and 10th graders take PE consecutively, and then they finish it and they don't have to take it anymore. There are often electives that are offered in PE, and students have the option of taking those courses. And then in the 5th slot, I call it, Many students choose to take their visual and performing arts elective in that year, but that's not required. Some schools will have a requirement and say, oh, all ninth graders are going to take VAPA. But some schools leave that a little more open-ended for the student to make choices. There is a one-year requirement for visual and performing arts for high school graduation. It is not a requirement for most colleges, but it is for some. Now let's get to history. There are 3.5 years of requirement in history. And actually, American Canyon High School handles history and English a little differently, so we'll talk about that in a moment. But the requirement is a world history, a United States history, and in senior year, American government and economics. And those are the requirements for graduating from high school and college admission. And following that, we have world language, which is a 3-year requirement for college admission. But again, it's one of those topics that to be a competitive applicant for a 4-year college, you're really looking at the most competitive, 4 years of math, 4 years of world language, and 4 years of science. But every student's different, and they take their path in the way that makes sense for them and their goals. And so it depends, as a family, what it is you're reaching for. So how do we think about this? We have several spaces where students can make choices around electives. I know that one of the things that we really care about here in American Canyon High School is access to visual and performing arts. It is clearly something that the staff, the students, and the parents of the community value greatly. And that won't change. There will continue to be visual and performing arts programming at this high school, whether it's a 7-period day or a 6-period day. Because we have, for example, I started to think about what I could share that might ease some of the concern in the room. So I went over to Napa High School's master schedule and counted up all of the visual and performing arts offerings so that you'd know that in a 6-period day, there are pretty much the same offerings that are available here in American Canyon High School, large music program, choral program, then things in the arts, in the visual arts like art, photography, ceramics, things of that nature. So there are some similarities across the different schools in terms of offerings, but clearly one of the biggest differences, of course, as you know, that when you have a 7-period day, students can double up. They can make a commitment to the choral music program for 4 years, but also be able to experience and dabble in other arts programming. And that's a wonderful thing. There's no doubt about that. I'm going to keep moving to the next slide just so we can keep moving. Then we'll ask questions based on what your interest is. So one of the things that the site administrative staff, leadership team, and teachers have been excellent about is trying to be creative and think outside of the box and figure out how we can make this work. How do we meet the budgetary demand that's before us and still provide for our students the great opportunities that they've had for the last 10 years? So Ms. Lopez has been kind of working with her team, and we're working together to try and figure out what options there could be. One of them that the site staff has offered is the potential of reducing the 7-period day at the 11th and 12th grade levels. And I drew up some information that might help us as we think about that. There are a fairly large number of 11th and 12th graders who don't access the 7 periods. They're enrolled in only 6 periods. So that seems like something we could talk about. In addition to the number of students who are not taking or who are not actually enrolled in 7 periods, there are also a number of these students who are enrolled in school, but they're taking TA or teacher assistant. They're helping with a staff member in the office or in the classroom. So they're not in an academic class. So there are many seniors who are, in addition to the 296 who are not enrolled in the 7th period, a 6th period is actually a TA, not an academic class. How many 12th graders? About 400? A little under 400 12th graders. Yes, about the same for 11th. Thank you. So next, I think it's my last piece of information. So some of the ideas that have been discussed on how to ensure that our students still have access to the rich course options that they've had in a 7-period day. And these are some ideas. Of course, the ideas that the staff offered up around 11th and 12th graders. In addition, increasing dual enrollment options with Napa Valley College. This is an interest, regardless of this conversation or not. I'd like to see us really increase the opportunities that our students have on our high school programs, campuses, to access college-level coursework and college-level credits. So this saves parents dollars, and it gives students a way of exploring and getting used to the rigor and the pace of a college course. So I think it's a win-win. It's also part of the new accountability system. It's called the College and Career Readiness Indicator as part of the new dashboard that assesses how we're doing. And one feature of that College and Career Readiness Indicator is the numbers of students who are dual enrolled, meaning they're enrolled in college and high school. Right. So the question is, would those classes, if they were offered here on the campus, would they be during the school day? And what's really interesting about this, because it's kind of new, we're moving into about 18 months of a new law where dual enrollment is really an open kind of thing now, where it's no longer what I was familiar with, which is that you often went to a class outside of the regular school day, and often it was held at the college. And a student doing that would be called dual enrolled, but they were really just, being really eager and taking a class outside of their high school day and taking it out of their personal time. In the new era of dual enrollment, there are many ways of satisfying that. You can go to the college and take courses there. You can modify the schedule that your student has during the school day. They still have to make sure they cover those requirements that we covered before. But outside of those requirements, they can take courses that are offered on the campus here, which is what I'm hoping to increase, at the college, outside of their regular school day, and possibly even within it. So those are the kinds of things we're exploring. They could be. They could be both. And it could be different from one student to another. Correct. Online classes is the question. Would it be an option? Many, I don't know if I'm overstating when I say many, but there are online courses being offered through Napa Valley College and, of course, elsewhere. And I'm going to have to explore the law on that, but I can't see why not. I'll come back with some information about that. So the next couple of things that are options as well is we have in the district had a long history of offering what we refer to as early or late flight. Basically, they're before and after school classes. There are a couple of those examples already in the schedule here at American Canyon High School, and an option is to increase opportunity of those kinds of courses so that students have access to more electives in that format. And lastly, there's another feature to the additional teaching the additional teachers required to run the program here at American Canyon High School. The big one is the 7th period, but there's another one, and it's the Humanities Core. And so there's two reasons why the Humanities Core kind of requires a little more teacher, or what we call FTE, full-time equivalent. And the reason is that let's take the 9th grade as an example. It's the English History Core, and we have about 50 students together in one room with 2 teachers, and they're exploring big history. Now, if we were not coupled like that, we would have 2 separate periods. Students would be in English class with 1 teacher, and they'd probably be a lot bigger, like 32 kids would be served in that classroom. I would be in the history class with a different teacher. Again, my class size is right up around 32. So when we do the coupled Humanities Core, we lose seats, if you will, if that makes sense. So there's more teachers required to deliver in that model. In addition, if you remember when we talked about the history requirement, we don't have a 4-year history requirement. We have a 3-year history requirement. So when we add in that history course, that big history course, it's an extra. one that it would not be required for high school graduation or college admissions for that matter. So, and I say all this not to value judge it, it's more, let's all have the same information. I don't want to convince you of one fact over another fact. These are just some realities. And we'll move on. I think that's the last thing I had to convey. We can go to the next, I think it's, so in terms of questions and comments, I think it makes sense to me, I don't know if it will to you, if we maybe chunk it, if we do fiscal kind of questions and programmatic kind of questions. And we have mics, and anyone want to come up and take a moment? Damon Wright, Executive Director of Secondary Education, is going to help out. Thank you, Mr. Wright.
Hi, my name is Pam Phillips. I have a senior and a freshman. Right now, my senior has been looking at colleges, and we've talked to a few counselors and whatever. There's a lot of requirements that you can fulfill here, but you're not being competitive by just only filling the requirements. Everybody out there in college, in the college application world, is way beyond the requirements that they're expected to have. So that's one thing. And another thing, I'm not quite sure, maybe looking at PE for freshman and sophomore versus those who are athletes. You know, there's so many athletes on this campus. Does that fulfill a requirement for PE?
It does not. It does not fulfill the requirement given current board policy. Sure, it could change. It's a difficult change because we have, when you're an athlete competing on a team, there is no concern around standards, state standards for physical education, and we do have standards for physical education, which we are obligated to cover, and so that would be a challenge. Oh, over here.
Okay, Heidi Zape, I'm a parent of a freshman and a sixth grader, so I'm going to be here for a good 7 years. Looking at so many things, but looking at the slide that you had at the end regarding the possible fill in the gaps. Maybe you could go to that. Yeah. Okay, so the early and late flight, I don't really see how that saves money because that still needs to be taught. I guess the savings would be on a lower number of opt-in students. However, science and the literature show right now that high school students should not be at school before 8:30 in the morning, so that seems like a non-starter right there. This school, American Canyon High School, started with the Humanities Core and with a 7-period day. So we're talking about a loss here, not just a change. I want to be clear that we understand that this is a loss. We don't want to give up our freshman big history and our humanities coupling. That's a loss in an academic program. That doesn't even get started talking about the electives. However, I was really intrigued by the slide you presented about changing the electives for the juniors and seniors and leaving for because as we can see here in this slide, right? So for us, I think everybody needs to be clear that that history that's in 10th grade is in 9th. And that's why our kids need the 7th period for the elective. That we need to understand that. But back to my point, if the freshmen and sophomores maintain the 7 period and the juniors and seniors did not, that would be a compromise in my mind to some extent because even if my child is career path, they are going to give up PE junior, senior year, and I'm not going to be that sad about that. If our district can make if our school site can make the numbers work so that this works, will the district accept that, even if that's different than what the other high schools are doing?
Well, I'll let Wade weigh in because he'll talk FTE in dollars. But the charge that we've given out to the schools that have a 7-period day is make it work on 5 of 6 funding. So if there are solutions to be had or found where different models could be achieved with the funding level of 5 of 6, that's an open door. Crystal Lopez and I and several of us have spoken about this. It seems like American Canyon can get close, but not quite neutral. And I'll let Wade speak on that for a moment.
So Marianne did a great job. That's why we're taking our time on this subject, because you can get a long ways with 506. When we've dived into the master schedule, we've noticed that some of the classes are staffed, have the class loads that are a little bit light. So you have 168 contacts, that's per your contract. But when we look at not just American Canyon, but all of our high schools, the contacts average somewhere between 140 and 150 students, not 168. So if we can tighten that up a little bit, maybe that gives us some of that savings. So there's a lot of work that we need to do with the master schedule, along with some of the great ideas that you guys are coming up with as we develop the budget. So there's some tightening that we can do as we do the master schedules.
Hi, I'm Steve, and I have a freshman here, and absolutely love ACHS. ACHS is a heart of our community down here in South County. So, no death spiral. No death spiral. You said death spiral last time you were here, and I wanted to say no death spiral. I'm seeing up there a death spiral. Okay, so I'm not pleased about that. Our principal has a plan for that, so was that a yes, that you will support our principal on doing the 7th period for freshmen and sophomores?
What I said yes to is that we've told schools, principals, because other schools have the 7-period day currently, that they have to find a schedule that can operate on the funding level of 5 of 6. And Crystal and Principal Lopez is working hard at getting close to that, but thus far we're not there yet.
Okay,
we haven't achieved it.
If Crystal can do that, then it's a yes.
Yeah.
It's a yes. Okay, it's a yes. All right.
5 of 6 funding, though. Let's be clear.
Okay.
That's a tough order.
So what do we need to do as a community to help cover the funding gap?
Well, we weren't presenting on this tonight, but I think there are some real tangible things. The question is whether they can be activated and applied for the 1920 school year, because we have to generate additional students, which the school has done this year admirably, raised enrollment. We could do some revenue generation, and the problem is, though, we have to have a real clear plan by the time we move into budget planning and staffing for 1920. The window for that is February, March. So we don't have a lot of lead time to have a real strong plan outside of changing the characteristics that we have the ability to change. Community can do a lot of things in addition to that.
Yeah, we're all here right here now, so how about starting that conversation tonight rather than waiting for February?
I'm sorry,
the conversation to get funding. How are we going to cover the gap?
Yeah, we're doing it already. I mean, we're already having the conversation.
So I noticed too in in the budget that Wade had put up there that the 1920, right? So the expense reduction in 1920 is almost $7 million, and 2021 is only $3 million. Could we not spread that out just a little bit and see if we can fill some of these gaps between now and then? I mean, I recognize that we want to have bottom lines that are black. Everybody does. And I see by 21, 22, we have a pretty cushy situation there, all things considered. But can we not spread that just a bit so that we don't start losing programming? And what Steve meant by the death spiral and that Dr. Mitetti had put out earlier is that if we are giving up our freshmen and sophomores' ability to take history and to take electives, you are going to lose us. We are going to leave. And the problem is going to be worse.
So the district has a board policy to maintain a 7.5% reserve for a rainy day. But right now the district's reserve is about 5%. So it's raining, exactly 5%. So what we would need to do is take some type of proposal like that as we develop the budget and say to the board, would you be willing to use some of the reserve to soften the changes at American Canyon High School, for lack of a better word?
So I have 2 questions. One, do you know how many teachers are staffed here at AC? Because I know you had a slide on there and it said you would have to have so many to staff a 7th period, and I don't know if we're below that or if we're doing fine. Yeah, that one.
So these
many
are
have staff?
approximately your number of FTEs right now.
So that we have, so we can actually sustain the teacher-to-student ratio and run that 7 period here.
Right. You probably have a little more than the 65.6 FTE right now.
So that's not an issue for us. Okay, thanks. And then my next question is, as far as being creative, why don't we open up our district, and I know some of you guys probably won't like this, but to outer district kids, because I have nieces and nephews who go to private school, like at St. Pat's, and they love the programs that we have here. I think that it would boost our enrollment. But you guys have strict guidelines of who can actually attend ACHS. And I get that's for a reason, but if we open that a little bit more and we see like, hey, you are this, or I don't know, make the criteria, or what's the word? Not so strict. It would increase enrollment, because again, I have relatives and friends who are drawn to this school but can't go to this school because of the city that they live in. And you prevent those kids from having opportunities and being well-rounded kids to apply for colleges, CSUs, and universities. So if you're talking about we can give more because of enrollment, let's look at our enrollment and be creative in other ways to get students here instead of cutting the cost and bleeding our parents who currently live in this city, who already come out of pocket to pay for multiple things as sports and all those other things. And this is coming from a mom whose son is, a single mom actually, whose son is in football, in jazz band, next semester, sorry, Mr. Day, but marching band and track. So let's look at creative ways to do it and stop, like, not just put a Band-Aid on the bleeding, but let's go down to the root cause and fix it. Instead of cutting, let's see where we can actually add, where it will benefit us.
So that was a great comment. In many districts across the state of California, the percentage of inter-district students is quite high. Sometimes 20 or 30% of the district's population comes from outside the district. So it's not uncommon. It has not been historically what Napa Valley Unified has done, but it's the discussion that we're going to have with administration and with the board as we move forward. But it's not uncommon across the state of California for there to be a good number of inter-districts, much more than we have here. The question was what percentage of inter-districts come to Napa Valley Unified? So there's about 250, give or take, so 250 divided into 17,500. It's a very small percentage. Around 2%, some mathematician other than me, around 2%, 3%.
Hi, I'm Tracy Norright. I have a sophomore and a junior here at the school. I'm just going to free flow because there's so much in the head here. So if we're taking away these classes, the periods for the younger kids, you're basically cutting all of our children off at the need to be able to go to college. These kids have, I mean, this is an educational system. You're supposed to be supporting the students, and I understand the money is like that, but we have an amazing school. We are different than the other high schools, and I think we deserve to be treated differently. We're working very hard to be exceptional, and I mean, look at what we're doing here already. So if our purpose here in a high school is to prepare our children for further education, because, I mean, who here doesn't want their kid to go to college? Okay, who here doesn't want their kid to go to college? We can appreciate those people too. I understand that not everyone wants to go to college. However, the whole point is for us to give our kids, I live in American Canyon because of the schools. If this was going down when I first moved here, I would never have bought a house here. And I can guarantee you there are a lot of people that are gonna leave the town. And it's not gonna be in Napa Unified. We're gonna get the hell out of Napa County. So you're going to lose way more, to the point that someone said down there. That is just, it's unfortunate, and it does not make any sense just from an academic standpoint. And you guys are supposed to be educators first. And I don't see that with all of this stuff, that education is really being taken into account, and it's breaking all of our hearts. And it's become very emotional for all of us. I know it doesn't really matter what we think. We can go boo-hoo-hoo all we want. But the fact of the matter is that we are here for our children, and if our children aren't getting the education that they deserve, that's just not fair. As far as the other schools on the 5-6, because I don't completely understand this 5, 6, 7, 8 thing, they all have music programs, right? I mean, my daughters are in art, my daughters are in music, all of his over there, music stuff, plus Lily's an overachiever, as we know. But I feel so, I mean, she's able to do music. She loves music for 4 years. You're cutting that off at the knees. I mean, this is something that's beyond education, that makes these children well-rounded, that also allows them to get into college. So it doesn't make any sense. It's not linear from any of our standpoint here in the room.
Oh, sorry. I don't know if my response is going to actually get at the heart of what you're expressing. But I think I have to say that most of the high schools, I was a high school principal for a long time, and Berkeley High and Castro Valley High both operate. I say this with great sensitivity, not to challenge. Most schools, most high schools offer only a 6-period day with some of those early, late flight options for certain kinds of programs. And it must be acknowledged that there are schools across the state that are sending wonderful and wonderfully prepared young people to really competitive four-year colleges. I think the root of this, and the challenge, I think for all of us, because I feel it's a challenge as well, is that we will be forcing ourselves to make choices that we don't have to make right now. Because clearly, students can make a commitment to a 4-year program and stay in it all 4 years, and at the same time take the most rigorous courses, and courses that are because they're interested in them. And that's all of those reasons for taking courses are wonderful. And it would, yes, we should try our best to preserve these kinds of opportunities for youth.
In the 9th grade, our kids were required, they took history. They didn't have a choice to not take history. It's not listed there, so they don't get that elective. So we didn't get a choice.
Right. Well, that's, I think, part of the discussion here is that there is a model in place that meets very specific interests and needs that were established a long time ago. And I am not saying that they weren't good or they aren't important interests and values, but we're at a juncture where we have to discuss the viability of moving forward in this model. And you're right, the big history is part of the fabric of the school, I feel. The teachers certainly describe it as such, real commitment to that model because of what it brings out in students and the kind of community that it builds. But it is adding to the courses that are required here. So as a parent, you didn't make a choice around that, but that is the model of the school. Correct. In the model that we currently have, yes. So he's pointing out that that list in 9th grade does not reflect the experience of an American Canyon High School 9th grader, because instead of that elective, it would say history. Because that's an extra course that is, I'll have to be real clear, some schools put that world history course, that requirement in 9th grade, most put it in 10th. So,
and the kids that are taking these programs now have the.
I can hear you.
So the kids that are taking these arts classes now, music classes, all that, they have the highest GPAs in the school. So they are good kids. And if you cut those out, those kids are going to leave, which is only going to cause test scores to go down and people to go to private schools. So we've got to fix this somehow. We can't allow that.
I add to my husband? Since we're,
May I-
since we're
may I
together.
jump in?
Oh.
That's okay.
Then you can go next. It's okay.
Hi, my name is Ellie Potter. I'm the parent of 3 kids. First, I want to thank you because I know a lot of effort goes into putting this information together, getting us all on the same page. I'm not familiar with the process. You'll see here 50, 100 parents. We all have a lot of ideas. Maybe you can speak a little bit about what is the next step in terms of forming a parent committee, getting our kids involved. I find that our students have a lot of ideas. They're more educated about even the future of college than we are, getting them involved in finding these solutions. So maybe you can just talk a little bit about the process and the next steps.
Sure. So one of, well, this is a unique kind of situation because we haven't had to face this particular type of discussion with a school community recently. However, the process in general for establishing the budget, as I said, this is a little early. We wouldn't usually be talking about budget and forecasting for next year until after January. That would be typical because the governor will release his budget and that'll have implications for school funding. Wade does a whole bunch of work to figure that out. And then there are things that we call budget roadshows, which are a tradition in this district, that are held both down here in American Canyon and up in the Napa Valley areas. And parents and staff members participate if they choose in dialogue around what we have to do with our money and how we're going to expend it. And then ultimately, after all this work that happens mostly internally, mostly staff is doing it, there is a presentation to the Board of Education in May where the budget and the strategic plan of the district is presented, and they discuss it and maybe request revisions or express their views, and then it is presented a second time for approval. And so all of that process is a public process when it gets to the board level, and of course any member of the community is invited to speak to whatever has been presented. But what I love about what you just said is student forums and student voice. And I think the site staff has done some work around incorporating student voice in their recommendations, but we can certainly formalize more of those sessions so that students can give us their point of view and their perspective. Thank you.
So if we wanted to self-organize,
Yes.
could we do it right after this and jump into your process and get ideas on the page? Because we need to get together and talk about the multiple levers. There's revenue levers, there's expenses levers, right? We outlined some options here. There's probably 100 other options. Could we self-organize right after?
I think we
and
could.
give
We
you a
could probably get a
proposal?
list going of parents who want to
Okay.
participate.
Good
Thank
plan.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Donna Drago. I am the principal of Napa Junction Elementary School. But I felt, thank you. I'm hearing a lot of parent angst, and so I just wanted to stand up as a parent. My grown children grew up in the Napa Valley School District. They went to Napa High, graduated. It was a 6-period day. They did have option of early flight. Both kids tried it for 1 year and decided there was no way how they were getting out of bed at 6 a.m. anymore. Both were very active in the music programs, in the leadership programs. Both graduated. They both went off to a 4-year college. They both got into Cal Poly, which was the most competitive CSU. And so 6-period days are really doable. They really are. The college requirements, they haven't changed since my kids went off and applied to college. I see that all the time, and I can see that the requirements are the same. So it's going to be okay. I know we want to fight for what you want your kids to have, but it's not the end of the world, trust me. My kids are grown, intelligent, happy, successful adults as a result of a 6-period day.
Hold on, if you want to speak, if you can raise your hand, I'll get you with the mic. I just want to make sure everyone can hear you.
I guess that's my point, is that my daughter's a senior, and I have watched her go through a 7-period school year up until now. And right now she's actually finally just taking a TA period, and she is one of those taking a TA period. But up until this point, it's 7-period, and she is able to take her a drama all 4 years, which has been remarkable. I mean, they win awards. The music department wins awards. We see Miss Walden's music department and choir win awards. All of our art are winning these awards. And they're creating people that get into college. The minimum GPA to get into a college is 3.5 to 3.7. That's the minimum. And then then you have the big bell curve that, people have like a 4 or a 4.1. And then you have those few with a 4.5. That's what our kids are facing. I mean, it's very competitive out there. And California is what, 47th state for test scores? And you still want to take more classes away from us. So, I really would think about how competitive you want our kids to be, because right now they are competitive. I mean, my daughter's graduating class probably has 50 people with, above a 4.0 grade point average right now. So I think by taking it away, you're going to make our kids less competitive. It's just such a different time right now, and everybody wants to go to college, and there's just not the space for everybody to go to college.
Just one comment. You want this school to be a school of being doable or a school of excellence. And right now, AC is a school of excellence. And once you do that, because it's minimum required, it's not okay with all the parents that showed up here that it's doable. We get that it's doable. We all went to a high school that had 6 periods. We get it. But we're in a different time now, and a different day. And if you look at all of our, our seniors who are, what's the highest? I forgot the name. Valedictorians. If you compare our valedictorians at this school to all the other high schools, we outrank them in a minute. And that's because we have the 7th period. We have the options. We have the opportunities for our kids to thrive. You take that away, then what?
Hi, my name's George Conoval. Have 3 kids currently enrolled. Can we go back to the slide that shows the 7th period utilization? I'm just wondering, when I look at that, and, maybe you can explain to me why, when somebody looks at the 7th period utilization, looks at 9th and 10th being fully utilized, and 11th and 12th maybe being utilized by 50%, why isn't the decision right off the bat to go, let's follow where the utilization actually is? And, in this day and age where common sense isn't common sense anymore, it baffles me why somebody doesn't look at that and go, oh, 11th and 12th are the ones that don't need the 7th period. So that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think that one of the things to acknowledge at this juncture is that no decisions have been made. These are pieces of information that I think add to the dialogue and add to all the information that we all get to think about and talk about and make recommendations around. So I agree with you. It seems like a very easy, sort of low-hanging fruit, as they say. But as I say that and as you see it that way, there may be people in this audience who, in fact, I think I heard some voices that said, don't do that. You cut them off at their knees. So there's going to be difference of opinion on probably just about any feature or aspect of this situation. So, and I want to respect that. Driving the decision to have this conversation, including the possibility of cutting a 7th period day for 11th and 12th graders, is a fiscal one. That's the driver. And
okay, I'm sorry. My name is Judy Simpson, and I have a senior here at this school, so he's on his way out. And my oldest is 10 years older than him, so she was here in the Napa district when you guys had some issues with regard to the classes and having the kids being able to graduate with enough credits. I've kind of been through that period. You made the changes with the curriculum. Now you're offering the 7 period. But can we go back to the page that you had that has the budget? Because you're saying it's a physical issue. It's a financial issue. So I'm looking, no, not that page. This page right here. So this deficit that this cost of this 7 period that you have there is based on this $92,000 annually, which I assume, and I'm not sure because I'm not sure where this number is coming from, but I assume that's the average of a full-time teacher's salary. Am I
Yes,
not correct? Okay. So what I'm seeing with this is that this is an average. So this is an average tenured, and this is nothing against teachers. I mean, they should be paid what they're paid, but I know that Napa's teacher salary is one of the highest. But what I'm seeing is you're saying we have this deficit for us to continue to have this 7 periods, and it's based on this average cost. But does this cost is based on tenured teachers and new teachers as well, right? So if this cost was, I don't know, if it was, what I guess I'm trying to say, adjusted for newer teachers. I mean, how many of these teachers possibly in the school district are retiring out, and how many are coming in where this cost could be fixed, or cost could be lowered, or cost could be, because what if the cost is lower than this? Because this is just based on the average. This is not based on what's actually maybe going on. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, and let me try.
Because you're saying we can't have a 7-day period because we can't meet this deficit, right? This $865,000 per year is what's going to really prevent us from having a 7 period in this school district, correct? Yeah.
So let me clarify the average here. $92,000 is an average. That's correct.
It's
so
average.
you have people that make more than that. You have people that make less than that. That includes not only salary, but includes health benefits and all kinds of benefits, workers' compensation, the STRS contribution that the district has to make for each teacher. So this is just an average, and so that's why we are taking this figure here of 92 as an average. But you're right, there are people below that and people above that.
Right. So, I mean, what I'm saying is there a solution that would include something that maybe our 7th periods are taught by newer teachers who cost less? I mean, I'm not saying that's for everything. I'm just saying you guys are looking for solutions to reduce this deficit. No, I'm not saying that they're guaranteed to do that. I'm just saying it's a way to. Well, I mean, there's a whole bunch of other things you can look at. I'm just saying, I'm just looking at these numbers and going, okay, but it's an average-based number.
I'm going to be really quick because I think I'm going to agree with what you're saying and what Mrs. Potter said too. I think that there is such passion around us keeping our freshmen in history class and keeping our freshmen in electives that this community is willing to get on our hands and knees and scrub away what needs to be scrubbed away so that we can keep our teachers teaching at the level that we have currently. And if there are other things, so this is my concern, and I'm glad Mrs. Potter brought it up. Sometimes the budget roadshow doesn't exactly land in the parents' purveyance. We want to be involved in this process between now and May, not just hear about it in May and have to storm the school board and make them all look at us crazy. We want to be involved now because we would prefer to do things like give up our charter buses for our athletes. My child will go on the school bus that is owned by the district. My child does not need to go to the swim meet on a charter bus. And I'm sure if we do that enough across this school, we are going to save some money. We need to find ways, and that's what you're saying, we need to find ways to wring out some money, and if we need to make some sacrifices in other places to keep the whole of our program, we need to be involved in that decision. So please include us all the way through, not just at the end, and maybe we can come up with something. And if we got to sell some cookies at the end, then, you know, Tracy's going to make them.
No.
Hi, my name is Renee Watson. I have a freshman and a 7th grader. And a couple questions. So we know that our school is known for its sports. So the idea of offering classes before school or after school, how would that work for our athletes? Because we want our athletes to be competitive to get into college as well. I mean, would that even work? Isn't there sports right after school? I mean, that's how it was when I was in school.
Yeah, it makes it incredibly difficult if you're an athlete, particularly if you're a multi-sport athlete. So one option is if you're a single sport athlete, then you could take an early or late class during your off season. That may not work for everybody because we have multiple sport athletes in our school, I'm sure. So it's not a solution that's going to work in every case. It's going to work in some cases only. So I totally acknowledge that. If we go back to the slide of enrollment, that's a great question because, yes. What is the deficit of students we're talking about? We've talked about declining enrollment at the start of this, and to get back to the fiscal picture, I think this is probably the most influential factor for us all to grapple with. Now, I'll let Wade take over, but that decline, I think it represents 2,500 students.
So this slide includes all of Napa Valley Unified School District. And then you can see the decline ranges between 125 and 250, 275 students per year projected. Now we're going to do another study. Actually, we're having one done right now to see what the numbers look like after we got our current enrollment for September. So we do this annually now because of this decline. So we'll have those numbers in December to inform our discussion about budget development in January. But this is really for an LCFF district. This is what we're dealing with, that decline and the subsequent decline in revenue. But as you said earlier, there may be ways to offset that. Now, we don't get funded on enrollment, we get funded on attendance. So if our students came to school every day, if there was a miracle and all the Napa Valley students came to school 180 days, that would bring in almost $6 million extra per year. 2 days, if all the kids came to school 2 more days, that's about $1.4 million. So right now, Napa Valley Unified does a great job with attendance. Our attendance across all grades is somewhere about 96%. Valley Unified does great with attendance. Could we get to 98%? I don't know. Kids get sick. You know, things happen. It's really hard. But can we do a little bit better? Sure, we could.
Hi, my name is Gina. I have a newly graduated senior and a 4th grader. I'm assuming when you talk about the fiscal situation that you're talking about the entire district. So to put ACHS in a silo for a minute, are we fiscally sound? Do we meet the new requirements?
As a system, our budget has the deficit you saw earlier of about $6.8 million. And that's what we have to present to the County Office of Education, to the state of California. We don't present a budget school by school, so we could present a budget showing everybody's enrollment, everyone's attendance, everyone's expenses. So we don't necessarily break the budget out and say, do the children at American Canyon High School produce enough revenue to drive their staffing costs? That's just not how it's done. 98% attendance, we wouldn't necessarily give them more because their attendance is better than someone that had 93% attendance. That's just not how it's done in a unified school district.
So we're not talking about American Canyon specifically. We're talking about fair and equitable across all of NVUSD. So we're right. I understand that math. But I don't see the other high schools asking for a 7-period day, and we have a 7-period day, and you're saying that you're going to take it away. That's my point. My other point is that my daughter graduated in 2018, and she is currently in Amsterdam. She's in Amsterdam at Amsterdam University College at a truly international school with students from around the globe. It's a 3-year accelerated baccalaureate program. If she had not been able to take all of the history classes, all of the humanities classes, all of the language classes, all of the fine arts classes, and gone to 0 period for 2 of her 4 years and taken color guard, there's no way that she would have gotten into that program. So those are the kind of opportunities that unfortunately you would be absolutely stripping our students from. And she's the first student at this school to apply to an international school. And a lot of students are talking about how that would be an amazing thing for them to do as well. And you'd be immediately taking that away from the rest of the students to ever go to ACHS. I think by going back to a 6-period day, you're taking us back about 2 decades. I don't think that's fair to fix the budget problem that the district created. The district needs to fix it without impacting every single student. I would also like to know how you plan to fit the health class requirement back into the 6-period day.
One, two, three. Thank you for your comments, and congratulations to your daughter. The health class we didn't even get into, and so that's going to add another area of discussion for us if indeed the graduation requirements change for our high school students in Napa Valley Unified to include a health course. You probably know this, but across most high schools, there is a 1-semester health course that's required, often taken in the 9th grade, not always. And at this point, Napa Valley does not have that requirement. There is quite a strong interest in rejuvenating that requirement, and lots of indicators in the community, not local community necessarily, but the world at large, tell us that our teens need a lot more help in areas of health and wellness. And so that's another reality. So you threw another into this dialogue, which will have impact on, regardless of what happens as a result of this dialogue today, there will likely, or there may be, I should say maybe, because I don't know what's going to happen as a result of the work that's being done, there may be some changes in that arena as well. So thank you for raising that.
Kind of a general response. I've tried to stay on the sideline. It's hard. I do want to. I want to recognize. I think Marianne and Wade have done a great job. You know, we hear your concern, your heartfelt concern, and we're going to consider all of that. I do want to illuminate that the fact that we are facing a budget conundrum has forced the district. I think the parent in the back used the word utilization. The bottom line is that we have historically provided the FTE, and you see that there's a large proportion of juniors and seniors who are not actually leveraging it. So I want to recognize in the room that when you do have budget pressures, you look at things more deeply and more critically, and that's really important for us as a school district, and this is a venue and an opportunity to do that. Because if we blindly allocate the teachers, like Crystal just said, and say, well, there's a 7-period day, and we don't look at utilization rates, we actually are not being stewards of your dollars, right? And so that's a data point that emerged because of this critical analysis. So I just need to name that. So that's number one. And that's the nature of the work that we're doing right now on the expenditure side. I want to talk about two things: the revenue side, and I want to talk about quality of coursework. So I'm gonna just drop a statement. It's probably not going to be favorable for this room, but most California public high schools run on a 6-period day. Yeah, I know, but I just have to say that, like a context piece, right? That's a context piece. And it's not actually for college and career readiness and competing like so many parents have identified. It's not really the volume of the coursework, it's actually the quality of the coursework and the rigor of the coursework. So to really compete, coming from a California public high school, one of the variables that is looked at is what is the nature of some of the programming at schools. For example, just again, it's all of these things are up for discussion and debate, and I'm not adding value to one or the other, but I'm just putting out information as we try to co-construct potential solutions, because decisions haven't been made. We're right now in a collaborative dialogue. But really, a big competing lever, if we're going to talk about college admissions, is going to be advanced placement programming. And so one of the things that I have to look at across the district, I haven't drilled down as your new superintendent in month 4 quite yet, is to look at our master schedules. And do we offer the robust programming that if we're just going to talk about college admissions in isolation, not everything else, the whole child and career technical opportunities, which is going to resonate for some students who may not go the 4-year university college route, right? It's all competition of time in the master schedule because we want to try and meet the needs of as many students as possible. But there's been a lot of echoing of this college competition component. And I do want to echo in the room that there's a lot of California public high schools on a 6-period day sending students to very competitive programs, not because of quality of courses, but not because of quantity of courses, but because of the quality of the coursework in the master schedule and in the course catalog. So that's analysis work that we're going to be doing, because we do want to make sure that our students in NVUSD are competitive for college. And I don't have an answer yet. I'm hearing a lot of qualitative stories, but what does that look like? Like, are we really tracking where the students are landing? What proportion is ACHS? Have a greater college acceptance rate at more competitive colleges than the other high schools in the district or in the state that have 6-period days? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that today. Maybe if I would work like 100 hours a week, I would have that research conducted thus far, but I haven't sort of drilled down. But those are the critical questions that we have to ask ourselves if we're going to talk about the college competitive component. And then there's other pieces to our children's education. There's also just things that we want as parents as part of our children's education. But I'm responding to that theme that's come up in the room. So I kind of want to bring that up. The third thing is revenue. I'm really clear coming to American Canyon 3 times in the last month in this first little hump of my superintendency here, and engaging with all of you that you care passionately about your schools. That's like ultra clear. And that to us is like, I don't know, liquid gold. I mean, it's just like, that's invaluable. Where we don't have that, we expend a lot of energy trying to generate that. So it's not something that we take lightly or for granted. So I can reassure you of that. When you talk about revenue generation and talking about fundraising and what kind of, give us what the solutions are, right, to avoid the deathward spiral. I know I've been quoted here a couple times, which is appropriate and great. There are special programs a lot of the times in communities are retained or expanded through some local measures. And so one of the things that we've named in our strategic plan, because of this fiscal crisis that we're facing in the Bay Area because of declining enrollment, is exploring all revenue generation opportunities, because the more we generate on the revenue side of the budget, the less we have to reduce on the expenditure side, which means retention of programs that you want for your kids, right? So that takes some work, right? Some of those, we know here in American Canyon, tremendous advocacy for our bond measure that passed. We know how Measure H, we know the enthusiasm and the support that the community demonstrated for the passage of that bond. So a lot of districts, I mean, some of the ones that I think Marianne worked in and that I've worked in, passed, you know, local parcel tax measures specifically not for facilities, but for program, right? Our bond measures are often to do all the updating and renovating and building of schools like this beautiful school we're in, because the state of California doesn't really give us money for that. So we have to rely on the local community effort to be able to maintain our facilities, improve our facilities, and sometimes build new ones. If we don't have the local support through a bond measure, we can't do that as a school district. So we need community support. The mechanism, the typical revenue mechanism for program retention is usually a parcel tax measure, and we do not have one here. So those are the kinds of ideas we have to explore. For example, I've been in districts that had robust college counseling because they really cared about college admissions and college acceptance and college competition. And so the way that they brought down college counselor caseloads to students was by passing a parcel tax measure that was around that program, right? Thus, they had, you know, lower ratios. So those are kind of the solutions that we have to think about, but they're not ones that we can like just make happen like that, because they're going to require us to do some potential campaigning, discussions with the board, considering all those things, feasibility studies. Is there really support for that? I don't know. I'm new, and those are all the things that we need to discover, that I hope to discover together. My parents who are seniors, it's not quite relevant, but my parents that are 6th graders and 9th graders, absolutely. So those are just the 3 kind of comments I wanted to make as your new superintendent, kind of hearing the themes emerging in the room.
It's just an idea, but
Yes.
try and imagine with me. What if we do a 6-period day, and we make a 7th period, but optional? We have teachers come and teach. We come and have teachers teach for a passion as a 7th period, and not as a job. And we get the community to help and come support as well.
I think, yeah, that's a great idea. And I think you're talking about like volunteer. Is that what you mean? Like that they're passionate about it and that they would be willing to commit time to do that. I think that our teachers do a lot of that inherently as their work as educators. They put in a lot of extra time and a lot of unpaid time and those kinds of things. I think with things like academic programs that land on course transcripts, we have to be really mindful of it being a very sustainable approach to how we build our master schedules and the courses of study for our students. So that might work for a year, but it might be wishy-washy year to year but it's a great idea, and it's definitely something that demonstrates, I think, the heart of a community like American Canyon that cares deeply about its schools, because I bet you could probably rally up some teachers that would be willing to do that here.
Yeah. My name is Janelle Selleck. I have 2 incoming freshmen next year, a 7th grader and a 6th grader and a 4th grader. So I'm really glad to hear your recognition of the tremendous passion in our community, because it's one of the things that drives this school forward. It drives all of our schools forward, is a local support. And I think the reason that we have it, that we are all sitting in this room and that we care so deeply about this school, is because we've been a part of a model that's really a leader in what a school could be. And so we don't want to lose that passion, and I feel like if we go the route of making drastic cuts so quickly, we're going to deflate. We're going to lose some of that passion behind what makes our schools so great. So I'm really glad to hear some of the options for revenue generation. I think it's really important to balance that with cuts as well. And I think there's real option and a real possibility of a tax measure that maybe could benefit us in the future. So I guess my message for now is at all costs, let's avoid drastic cuts to the 7th period day right now, to give us a little bit of time to figure out how to balance what that revenue generation looks like, whether that's community support, whether that's a tax measure, whether that's some other exciting new option, with making this work over the next few years while we figure out what that is. And maybe that is just a 7th period day for the freshmen and the sophomores. But my concern is that if we take it all away, and we do wind up passing a tax measure or something else great comes forward, it's going to be really hard to ever add it back in, because we'll adjust to what the norm is. And once we've normalized to a 6-period day, the reality of getting back that 7th period and adding in those the enrichment programs it's going to be hard to get back to that. So I think it's really important to look at it from both sides and balance out and slow down the drastic cuts that we're talking about.
That's a fair request.
My question is every single school in the unified school district making such cuts as we are going to be as well?
Yeah, we're having to look at everything. We're looking on the expenditure side, but we're also doing a critical analysis on the revenue side. So we're looking at everything.
So I guess,
but just to answer your question, if we were to compare you to the 2 other comparable high schools, which would be Vintage and Napa, they have approximately the same number of students. They're a little bigger than you are, this master schedule costs close to $1 million, shy of $1 million, as you saw, more than it costs to run the 6-period days at Vintage and at Napa. So this is $1 million more, close to $1 million more in FTE. So are we going to have to consider reductions everywhere? Yes, that includes potentially some of when you have a $6.8 million potential deficit, the elementary schools where the students are, the middle schools. So that's what's a little tricky, is that there's a hyper focus, of course, here at the high school. We've asked our middle schools that run a 7-period day in the Valley, because the 7-period day is being run at all of the middle schools, including in Napa proper. And we've asked them to undo that. And we're close to that being very close to like a decision. It's just not sustainable. We're showing you numbers around American Canyon High School, but the FTE to run the 7-period day at the middle schools in Napa proper, at American Canyon Middle School, and here run the district between $3.3 and $3.4 million. So the 7-period day is expensive across all middle schools in Napa and at American Canyon High School. So all the middle schools have been asked to make that reduction, and we are much farther along, because we're working. I don't know if Marianne wants to speak to the work she's been doing with the middle school principals. We're hyper-focusing here on the 7-period day at American Canyon High School, which is the only high school that has that model.
So I just want to add and clarify that there's one school that will continue to have a 7-period day. It's Harvest Middle School, and it has an IB program, and they are currently 7 of 8, so they're reducing. But I also want to clarify how and why that would be true. Harvest Middle School serves a very high poverty student population, and one of the things that, if we go back to fiscal stuff and talk about revenue, most of our schools and most of what we do is funded through what we call base dollars, the basic dollars that fund the lights, most of the staffing, the books, etc. There is an additional fund. It's part of the local control funding formula, LCFF, that Wade spoke about, that adds dollars to a district's revenue based on the numbers of students who are English learners, low income, and foster youth. Harvest Middle School has the highest percentage of those high-need students. So we are dedicating supplemental dollars, not base funds, to continue to fund the extra period at Harvest. That's the only school that will continue to have it. I just wanted to be real transparent about that. What changes in the middle school? They are currently, what middle schools are struggling with and concerned about is that they have access to electives that they won't have in a 6-period day. Particularly, and I have to commend the principals and their staffs, because what they're concerned about is those students who have like an English learner who has to take English language development in addition to their English class, they're wiped out of an elective. Typically, in a 7-period day, those students were allowed to take art and ceramics or whatever that school offered. There is also a really big commitment in our district to AVID. Have you all heard about AVID? It's a college readiness, college preparation kind of program. And our
At
Yeah.
middle school. In the middle, but not at the high school.
Yeah, we do. And so, and AVID's another program that's great for students who will be the first generation in their families to potentially attend college. And it's a lot of support systems that go into the AVID program. We have it from elementary through middle and high at many of our schools. And so I'm circling around to what do middle schoolers lose? Some of those middle school students who are AVID students will use that elective for AVID, and they won't be able to take Spanish, or they won't be able to take art. So it's a dramatic impact on every school that's losing it. It's dramatic. I think what I believe about what's different about American Canyon High School is that you were built on this. You don't have a different tradition. This is the tradition, and I feel it. No, they will not be eliminate all, but it reduces the amount of access. So similar to what we started off with the high school. It does not eliminate visual and performing arts or electives from American Canyon High School. There will be visual and performing arts electives and other electives. I'm seeing puzzle.
It's elective right now is a reading. My kid is in 6th grade. He takes all the class, whatever, math, science, social science. They did an A-B situation, English, PE, which I think they take PE for 3 years. Is that the thing that's different?
They do.
in middle
They
school?
take PE every
and
year.
then he does not have an elective right now because he's in reading support.
That would be now that's a great example, because if he weren't in that class, he might be able to choose Spanish, or he might be in the AVID elective.
Right, but so you're saying then, so all the kids take English, English, math, PE, social science, language arts, science, and an elective. I don't have the right number of fingers.
We're doing high-level math on our fingers, folks.
Where's the children?
We need to go back to school.
New math.
English, science, studies.
Social studies. Social studies and history are interchangeable titles.
No. Well,
oh.
So ACMS could not go to 5 of 7 because we did not have the classroom space. So we changed the schedule. Traditionally, our ACMS has been what's called a 7 of 8 schedule. Gave us a lot of options. We went to a 6 of 8 schedule, and it gave the teachers more time to plan their instruction. So the level of instruction went up in the core classes. For the students, they still had 6 classes. So at ACMS, we're not going to see a change in the number of electives because of these scheduling changes. Thanks a lot. But it could, depending on the schedule that the teachers come to, and they've been working on this for a while, it could affect the number of instructional minutes in English language arts and math, bringing us back in line with all the other schools in the district and in the state. It's sad for the teachers, but it's not the same elective implications that are at the high school.
Hi, my name is Alan Tran. I wonder if you can go back to the very first slide that you have up there, the reason that causing the deficit. Before that, we were talking about the increase over the year and the retirement contribution for the teacher. Oh, okay, I think that's the one. Okay, so let me try to understand this, right? So you're saying that these increases for the contribution for the teacher retirement fund is part of the reason that causing the deficit, right? So what is the penalty for not in full compliance with the law right now? I'm just looking at the priority here, right? We punish the kid, but we make sure that we're okay first. I'm just thinking today if I'm go back home to talk to my kid and I said, hey, They may take away your 7th period because we don't have money to pay for it. But as an adult, I make sure that I have a retirement well. So I don't know how I'm going to talk to my kid like that and say, so let's say you take away that, right? We save on my kids $500, but you may take away his opportunity to make millions in the future because he may not, because of he didn't get a chance to take some of this 7th period elective. He may not get to the school, the college that he wants. It will cost him a lifetime of earning. Talk about minimum service that you can provide, a minimum education that you can provide. And I know that there's a lady earlier say 6 periods enough. I think actually 6 periods is actually much more than enough. And I can tell you why, from my experience. I did not go to high school in the U.S. And I actually got full scholarship in Golden Gate University. But I went through hell to do that. And I went through hell to get to where I am right now. And I definitely don't want my kid to go through hell to get to where I am right now. So don't try to take away what we are providing to our kids right now. We actually not provide enough for them right now. If you compare with the Napa district, with Santa Clara district, Palo Alto, right? So when you compare, it's not fair. It's just about what we can provide to our kids at the maximum that we can, right? Even if we have to sacrifice ourselves, we do that. I know that right now, I actually pay for my kids to attend some online courses. Instead, I could put that money in my retirement fund, but I choose not to. So I think that we all can do the same thing, right? I think this number is a number that if we have to share the pain between the kids and ourselves, then let's share them equally.
I appreciate your comment, and I think many teachers would gladly give up some of their STIRs in order to benefit the students. But because we're all state of California government employees, the state law doesn't allow us any flexibility in these contribution rates. So in Sacramento, they tell us as school districts, you have to contribute this percentage, you have to. There's no option for us, unfortunately.
So what is the penalty? They're going to shut you down as a school district and take over if you don't contribute your maximum liability? They're breaking the law.
We're breaking the law.
Okay, teacher will quit. So at the end, you think that it's easier to, punish the kids rather than,
Right. For many years, up until the last 4 or 5 years, those percentages for both STIRs and PERS were about 7 to 8%. But because the fund for PERS and STIRs is statewide, and because of the Great Recession and some other things that happened, the amount in those funds is not sufficient to cover the future retirement costs for all of these employees. So the state of California has said we have to contribute more as employers into these funds. So unfortunately, it's not like a 401k where your employer can say, I'm going to match 3% this year and maybe 1% next year. It doesn't work that way for us, unfortunately.
I don't mean to try to minimize the expense or the benefit that you guys all deserve. I'm sure that you deserve a lot more than that. But my concern is the timeline. My kids only have 4 years here. But the retirement here, maybe like Janelle suggested earlier, maybe you can do some kind of a special property tax assessment to catch up with the underfunding of the retirement fund. And I think I'll be the first one to vote yes on that. And I think all the parents here will say yes on that. Yeah, let's get a vote for that. Because what I'm thinking, this one is a long-term problem, and we need a long-term solution.
You're right.
But the kids is a different thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's only that you're here for 4 years. My kid in the first year,
you get one
years
chance.
To go.
Yeah,
exactly.
You get one chance
of a
4
lifetime.
years.
So.
Yeah. And to contextualize this, because I think you bring up a great point. This is out of our control. This is imposed upon school districts. You have superintendents up and down the state. upset about this and frustrated with this. This is frustrating for the 1,100 school districts in the state of California are facing this dilemma. So this is not a choice thing, and unfortunately there's no room for creativity. It is a long-term problem, and then at the local level, because of California public school funding, we have to find the long-term solutions because the state is not finding them for us. So that's just the bottom line. So here we are engaging with our communities around choices. Choices that none of us should have to make, because you're right. Every high schooler that attends American Canyon High School only has one shot at high school. And unfortunately, because of California public school finance, we are always put in a position as your district leaders, as your Board of Education, even you as parents, as our unions, because our unions also are making choices. When we fund program, where do you think we're taking that from? Salaries. So Napa Valley Unified, in funding this, because we're a California public school district, we're underfunded, we're 46th in the country in terms of performance and in funding. Notice the the equilibrium there. I think something to realize that when we fund these expensive programs, there have been sacrifices that the educators in Napa Valley Unified have been making, because when you have 45 additional FTE across the district to fund the 7-period day at your middle schools and your high schools, you're talking about $3.4 million a year that doesn't go to a lot of other things. It doesn't go into our teacher salaries. It doesn't go to a lot of other sort of competing variables. So the choices are tough. And this, coupled with the declining enrollment piece, is our challenge, really. The two fundamental pieces is this pension reality coupled with declining enrollment is where the spin starts to happen. Because the whole Bay Area, there's very few Bay Area districts that are not dealing with this challenge. It is the affordability is not here, so people are leaving to more affordable states. California overall enrollment in the state is declining. And then you have hotspot areas like the Bay Area because people are saying, I can't have a decent paying job and pay for a mortgage here and raise my kids. And quality of life is too stressful and hard because of cost. Yeah, well, here, what's happening in the Bay Area is a lot of people that are purchasing aren't necessarily people that are purchasing with young families and kids. And certain, that's just demographic patterns that are happening here. Here in American Canyon, you are building, and hopefully that will bring more students, And I know there's this thought about, well, American Canyon in isolation, the numbers, but I'd have to do the hard math. I'm not really sure if the number of students generated in the increase, again, I'd have to do the math. I haven't done it specifically. I am not sure if the cost of the 7-period day has been completely offset by your enrollment. I think your enrollment hasn't hit enough of a mark to even create the argumentation that the increased enrollment here at American Canyon High School is actually funding the additional $1 million. I don't think, rough math, that's true. So I know there's a little bit of like American Canyon is, yes, you are, thank you. We need more kids, and we're not, I'm not saying that, I'm not undervaluing that at all, please. But I do need to say that the math is not as clean as, oh, our enrollment is increasing so dramatically that it offsets that cost. It doesn't. It doesn't. I don't think the math is there. So I understand as a parent where I would want to make that quick correlation, but I think if we look at the hard numbers, it's not. I think there's still a deficit despite the increase at this high school. So, yeah. Yeah, so donations of those sorts, I think, again, I go back to the heartfelt cry from the young person around volunteerism. It's just a basic best practice not to develop programming on something that is so non-stable potentially. So I don't want to propose solutions, but I think what the team and I will huddle around, and I want to be conscious of time because I see people leaving and we want to honor time and close the meeting, is that we heard the idea around how can you pace this so that it's digestible, that we look at utilization, right? Critical utilization, to be really honest and real around, yeah, we're giving you FTE for this 7-period day to run across all 4 years, but I got a whole lot of seniors and juniors who are have free periods and are serving as TAs on the district's dime, for lack of a better term, at the time that we have a budget challenge. That's not fiscally prudent, right? So that's fair, right? That's fair and realistic. So I think what we'll have to think about as a team is like, okay, well, that's not true for the 9th and 10th graders. How do we honor this idea of a gradual adjustment? And a gradual adjustment time period potentially gives us the opportunity to come back and link arms with the American Canyon community, because they're willing to link arms around their schools and have some discussions about revenue generation opportunities, which, if you have a year lead time, become a real viable potential. So that's kind of like off the cuff what's coming up for me. I'm probably insane for even like proposing any sort of solution oriented on camera and all those kinds of things. But I think that that's just kind of the natural theme that's emerging as we think about pace. You be honest with us. You can't deny that data point around the juniors and seniors, right? Like blindly providing FTE for that is just not, we are not being a good steward of your dollars if we do that. So there's that piece. And then how do we come back, re-engage? I've been here 3 times in 1 month. So how do we continue to, and I'm happy to continue to do it, and re-engage around a potential long-term revenue generation solution through some of the ways that I described that other districts do it when they want particular programs. Okay. Yeah, and just to be really explicit, districts rarely say things like we're going to pass a measure, or we're going to encourage through partnerships with cities or whatever other revenue partner might be out there for the 7-period day. That's way too specific. But districts do pass measures with broad language because you always need operational flexibility. It's unrealistic to think that you would tether it to something that specific around VAPA. Visual and performing arts, right? Like the retention of robust visual and performing arts programs, that kind of a thing. So I don't want to create a false expectation that you would be that explicit, because you always need operational flexibility. If we write in 7-period day into something, we would be locked, and you just never know what could come down the pipeline, and you wouldn't have the appropriate operational flexibility, but you could support VAPA programs.
Just to be clear, though, because I heard about, if the money was raised in American Canyon, would it stay in American Canyon? So if there was a particular tax measure of certain kinds that was generated by the city of American Canyon and the school district, then those monies could stay within the schools of American Canyon. And if they did the same thing in Napa, those monies could possibly stay just in Napa and in Yountville. So there are ways to do that. Right now, if you want to do a little research, do some Googling, look at Pasadena Unified School District. They're working with their city. They're just like us. They're in declining enrollment. They have the same expense issues. And they're working with their city to pass a general tax measure in which they can do some program things that they want to do at Pasadena Unified. So go do some Googling, look at it. It's hard to do. It's hard work, but it's been done. So we think we can probably do something kind of like that maybe in the future.
I think on behalf of all parents here, I would say that a small group of us, because it's typically the same parents in every one of these meetings, we're willing to self-organize and take this offline and maybe have a wine and cheese party in somebody's house and come up with a list of suggestions, the levers for revenue and for cost. And maybe even next time have a presentation by the parents versus us being the recipients of this, to help each other out, because we're a team, right? So this feels a little bit like we're whining and complaining, and you guys have done a phenomenal job of doing all of the research and putting the data together. So let's put our heads together and make some things happen. Thank you.
I'll close by just creating the realistic expectation that we do have a budget that we have to submit to the state of California that has to address the deficit. That's just our reality. And we're taking this input, and that's gonna have to go sort of live for 1920 in the process beginning in January, coming to like something tangible in March, and then for board approval later in that spring. So that's our reality for 1920. So the likelihood that we pull off long-term solutions to address the hemorrhaging between now and when budget development launches for 1920 is probably tough. I'm just being honest. So that's where you go, okay, but if we have will from this part of the community for long-term solution, then how do we get started on that work like ASAP? Because it will take a year, it will take 18 months. These kinds of efforts take that length of time. And then how do we consider pacing, right, impacts as we let that work sort of unfold? I have to protect the district and say we do have budget development starting in January. We are going to have to put some decisions on paper that will impact 1920. No. Well, I just. No, there's no 7-period day as a decision. You're going to 6 period.